name is Jessica May, and I'm very proud to be the executive director here at the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art. And my heart is so full seeing a crowd of people for art on what I think maybe is our hottest day of the year. So I want to thank you all for fighting the urge to sit in front of the TV and watch Olympics and come out and celebrate the work of, I think, someone whose presence in our community and as an artist is just so absolutely special. And this is truly an evening to celebrate. So first, before I introduce Mona, and I know we're all here for Mona, I want to thank those of you who are members or who are about to become members of the Kemper Museum of Art. It is, yes, thank you. It is the lifeblood of this institution, our ability to not only literally and figuratively keep the lights on in our imagination and our buildings, our ability to be a cool space for any person who comes in the door at any time of year. That is all made possible through the act of faith that our members have in this institution. So if you are a member, truly thank you from the bottom of all of our hearts. And if you're not yet a member, join us. This is our 30th anniversary year, and so we have a special $30 a year membership. There are some lovely perks, but I think the most important perk is to know that you keep the engine going and you keep the spirits high, and this will always be a home for you and your own communities, and we are so grateful to you for considering it. I also want to just acknowledge and thank the incredible team here at this institution. Louise, Graham, Neil, Jennifer, Krishan, and Dawn are all here tonight. And if you are staff of this institution, will you raise your hands and just be acknowledged for putting together these great events? Thank you. Thank you. I like to think of museums as villages, and as many of you will know, I'm about 6 months into my job here, and this is the best village. So I'm really, really happy to be here. So, a little bit of business. If you've got your cell phone, will you check and make sure that it's either quiet or on airplane mode or whatever you have to do in order to make sure that we can all listen peacefully to Mona's talk tonight. And second, I am so pleased and proud to introduce and welcome to the Kemper stage our multidisciplinary artist and the star of the show this evening, Mona Cliff. Mona's name is also Hanook-gah-neeh. Cloud, she is spotted, and she is both a resident of the town that is currently called Lawrence, Kansas, and a member of the Nakota tribes and nations. So our great joy is to welcome Mona. And I also want to acknowledge, before I get into this, that one of the things that you will have seen on the screens, if you were sitting and looking at the screens before the video began, was a document in process. Our team has been working with Mona and an esteemed community of scholars and knowledge holders within Indigenous communities in this region to develop a thoughtful and I think a quite far-reaching statement of place and a land acknowledgement. And while that land acknowledgement is not finished, the work of land acknowledgements is never finished. So I want to acknowledge that I and all of us are guests on this land, and we are deeply appreciative to be here, and I am appreciative to be here, not only in this built space where we can enjoy cool against the heat outside, but also very much to be a guest living on this incredible land. Mona's work explores subjects very close to my heart, including contemporary Indigenous identity and culture through her use of traditional native crafting methods, such as and including beadwork and sewing applique. She has both made small work and extremely large work, and I personally was introduced to Mona's work the very first time I came to Kansas City because I flew into the airport and had the experience of seeing a major work of art that is on view there as a permanent installation. But she also has permanent work on view, public artwork on view, excuse me, at the Kansas City Museum and at Haskell Indian Nations University. A forthcoming commission this coming September will open at the Autry Museum of American Art in Los Angeles. She has had recent residencies and awards from the Institute for American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, the American Crafts Council, and Art Place America. She serves often as a teacher, curator, and a consultant, and all of these in addition to being an exceptionally busy artist with a astonishingly productive studio practice. So tonight we're celebrating the work that Mona has on view in New Worlds, Women to Watch 2024, which is an exhibition at the National Museum for Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. And as some of you may know, her work was included in the Women to Watch exhibition that was here in 2022 and is part of a national sort of network of Women to Watch exhibitions that's really, I love the people at, did I do a bad thing and forward? No, maybe not. I have a habit of accidentally forwarding the slides. It's happened so many times and it's earned me a reputation. In any event, we were able to show one of the iterations of Women to Watch here, and so we were so proud to be part of Mona's journey, which is now expanding and expanding and expanding. And so I can't wait to see the show in Washington, D.C. I cannot wait to see the artwork at the Autry, and I cannot wait to welcome you to the stage. So can we all just give a warm welcome to Mona Cliff, and thank you for being here.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to see you all, and thank you for braving the heat to be here. Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'll use my mom voice. So I wanted to start off my talk with thanking the Kemper for hosting the Women to Watch exhibition in 2022. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to the Greater Kansas City Area Committee of the NMWA, the National Museum of Women in the Arts, for their support in getting me to DC to the opening. Can you all hear me still? Okay, good. I also wanted to thank Arlene and Beth for coming to the opening exhibit. That was really special, and I appreciate you guys being there. I wanted to acknowledge my dad for being here because he's all the way from Washington State, so. And my daughter's here too, so it's bridging the generations, which I absolutely love. Washington State's a really long ways away, so I'm really glad that he gets to be here and see me speak. So I guess I'll get started with my talk. I always like to begin my speaking artist talks with context with beadwork, because the foundation of my practice is beadwork and fabric applique and traditional arts. And so I like to show a few examples of the type of beadwork that is regularly seen within our Native communities, which is usually stitch beading. There's many different ways to apply beads to various objects, but the primary way is to stitch bead, and it's usually used for ceremonial items or regalia. And so just for context, I really like to showcase the type of beadwork, and these women's dresses that you see here, which are traditional dresses, they take probably a year or longer to create, and every time you see somebody's regalia, it's an identifier of who they are as a person, and the symbols that you see signify like what tribe they're from, what region they're from. The colors are usually like personal choice. And then what you see on the right is a man's traditional outfit. And his entire vest is beaded, his arm cuffs are beaded. There's usually like pieces that come down to the side that are beaded as well. And the labor that goes into this, I really feel is also something that I put forth in the work that I do too. So here's more examples of types of bags that are beaded too. And the history of beadwork, it extends like through a certain amount of time, because beads were brought here to America through trade, and that's how a lot of tribes had acquired using beads. But I think the initial use and how they were used maybe in Europe or where they had come from, this is what I love about the way that beads are used, because it has been transformed to become an identifier of who Native people are today. And it really is the amount of beadwork that's out there, it's just amazing, in collections. And I could spend all day on Pinterest, like pinning things and just, looking at all just the beautiful designs. And, the thing is about this is that a lot of the designs, they're very regional, they're very specific to certain tribes. And so if you are familiar with beadwork or the designs, you can identify where those people come from. You can see what tribe they're from, maybe what region, and it varies widely across the United States. And so there's such a huge, beautiful, extensive history of beadwork. And that's where my introduction had come to from beading. Is I was in college, I was doing printmaking, and I was learning about all these like amazing fine art masters and painters. But what I wasn't seeing was examples from my own experiences. And I had a really great art education, and it was very stern. They were very stern at us at that school. Yeah, there was like no excuses, like you had to get your work done. Anyways, I think my junior year is when I had approached my grandmother, my father's mother, and I had asked her to teach me how to do beadwork. And so the type of beading that she had taught me was bead embroidery. So there's like a 2-stitch method. I mean, there's all different kinds of methods across, of applying beads. But she taught me two needle stitching, and then over the course of time, pre-YouTube, pre-Google, I learned from other beadworkers how to do stitch beading, and it ultimately became something that as I was learning from them, I was also learning these teachings that are very broad, but then they can be very specific to the tribe of how we create this beadwork and how it's shared in our communities. And I feel like really the work that I'm doing now is tied ultimately to those teachings, because there's beauty in that. There's beauty in the teachings that my grandmother taught me, and that's really the basis too of what the work I do. And so my next examples are, this is stitch beading that I had done, and you see like Star Wars, there's like Star Wars here I did for a friend of mine, and some other examples that I had done, but I had spent, so from 2009 until 2018, I was primarily just a stay-at-home mother, and I focused solely on traditional arts, making regalia for my family, just making items, self-teaching. I self-taught how to do moccasins, because where I was living, I didn't have access to those teachings, and of course my grandmother, wasn't around anymore, and so I had to just learn how to do everything on my own, and maybe even get instructions from like manuals and random stuff like that. But so this was the work that I was doing while I was at home with my children, because I knew that I didn't want to have to break up what I was doing of being a mother and then having to choose between being a mother and being an artist. So I just chose to like focus solely on traditional arts, because that's what I wanted to give back to my children too. Because while I was growing up, my grandmother had given me so much in her teachings and so much in what she had gifted to me, that I felt like that was my role to give to my children. So in 2018, I had come back to doing a contemporary practice. There was just something itching inside of me that I knew that I had to break free from maybe these constraints of traditional practice, because I felt with a contemporary practice I could explore more what these themes mean to me as a person. And so I came back to my practice. I'm multidisciplinary, so I work within a lot of different mediums, but at the time, when I had come back in 2018, I literally didn't know what I was gonna do. I didn't have no idea. I was like, what is my voice as a mother too, that had changed my perspective, and how I see the world and how I carry myself throughout the world. And I didn't know what I needed to say, but I knew that I needed to carry forth generational knowledge. And so these next slides right here is 2018. I had come back to my practice, and this was with like paint from, thank you. This was like, this is like Hobby Lobby paint on paper. It's like, the one that you see on the left was one of the first ones that I did, and I was thinking about the knowledge my grandmother had given me, and so that's why I had titled the series Generational Knowledge, and I wanted to carry forth like what identity is and how, what are these signifiers of what identity is, and how do we share who we are with the world? And so the examples I showed to you before with the beadwork and the regalia that they were wearing, you know, it's such an important part of our culture, of our Native American culture, is sharing who we are as a person, because we come here with a purpose. Our spirits come to this plane with a purpose, and we go forth in the world knowing our place in the community and how we represent our families, how we, you know, but also how do we identify ourselves as a human being on this earth. And so my name, Spottedcloud, or Cloud She Is Spotted, was given to me by my grandmother. And I also have a few other names that are more personal that I keep to myself. But, you know, we go forth through the world and we try to tell everybody who we are, you know, by the things that we wear, by the actions that we do. And so I wanted to convey this in my art by trying to visualize what generational knowledge means through women. So how do we carry these practices on through the generations, and how have we received this information? And so, yeah, this was my first few pieces that I did. It was really fun because I got to go to South Africa because the one on the left, they invited me, and I just thought that was a really neat experience. It was the first time I was away from my kids for more than a day, so that was scary, but it felt weird. But so yeah, that was a really good experience, and it kind of, you know, solidified that my choice that I was making to pursue a contemporary art practice I was going in the right direction. And so it took me several years, 3 years at least, to really work through these ideas. And, you know, even to this day, I still don't know exactly what it is I need to say as an artist, but I think that that's important because I'm working through it, because I think if you already know, then you're done, you know. And so I feel like exploring and always questioning, you know, what my voice is as a woman, as a Native woman, as an artist, as a mother, how am I going to convey that to everybody, and, you know, in a way that they can understand as well. And so this brings me to my commission, because between these pictures and this picture, I did this huge leap. I had a pivot in my practice where, when I had come back to, you know, beginning, you know, practicing contemporary art, I was thinking in just one mindset, but I knew that I wanted to bring traditional crafting with me, because it's such an important part of my experience in moving through the world, and such a huge part of Native American culture, because it's how we express ourselves in the world. And the time and labor that goes into making a piece, it's as important as what you're seeing that person wearing, because while beads themselves are not like particularly expensive, some can get expensive. Like if you get like solid gold, it's really expensive. But I mean, my collection is out of control. But but beads in themselves do not necessarily are not very expensive. It's the time and intention that you're putting into the work that is giving that value. And so when my grandmother was teaching me how to bead, she had expressed that every stitch that you're making is a prayer, and that you have to have good intentions, because what you're creating and what you're giving to somebody, they're going to be wearing it on their body. So you need to have good intentions, because, I mean, your energy is literally going into that item, and you're creating it from nothingness. It's coming, you're willing it into existence by every stitch that you make. And so in 2020, I should have put that on my slides, I was asked to commissioned to do a work for the Kansas City Museum. And as we were, you know, we had to meet via Zoom, and they wanted me to create a piece that was an installation in a particular area in the museum. And so I was looking at the space via Zoom and imagining, we were talking about what other artists were doing, and she had mentioned that another artist was using reclaimed wood from the property, which really had kind of struck something within me to begin to visualize what I wanted to see in that space. And I had been doing painting for a while, and I knew that I wanted to get back to bringing seed beads into my work, and I had visualized these pieces in that space. And when I first began to do this work, my first intention really was to think about what it means to honor something, like honor an item, honor a person. And I'm very connected to, learning about, nature, and I'm trying to establish a prairie garden in my yard right now. Just learning, as much as I can, but also there's specific things within my own culture and spirituality where we're using trees. And so I see them as these living entities and that they deserve our respect. And so when I had envisioned this piece, I was thinking about how am I going to honor trees, because they give so much to us. I mean, literally they're giving us oxygen to breathe, and they cool the earth down. And so I feel like they really need a lot of thanks. And so I had titled this piece Ha-Ho, which means thank you. And it was really spending time with this piece of wood that I actually salvaged out of the Urban Lumber Company's salvage yard. It came from their salvage yard. I pulled it out of this really gross wood pile. I was walking around in there, and I was looking for something that was really interesting and that stuck out to me. And so from that piece of wood, I've gotten four pieces that I've made so far out of that. But anyways, I really wanted to focus on how do we honor and how do we connect to nature and our surrounding environment. Because, as I had said earlier, a lot of the different tribal designs that you see, it really is a signifier of the region that they came from too. It's an identifier of the connection that they have to that land. And so I need to establish that connection myself. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and so I grew up with all these beautiful trees, and then I came here to Kansas, and I'm trying to reconnect. You know what I mean? I'm let's find the beauty, you know what I mean? And so that's, I really was how do I connect to my surroundings, and how do I find the beauty in my surroundings? And so spending time with this wood, and that was my initial approach to doing this work, and it was a huge pivot in the way that I'm working now and the pieces that I'm doing. And so these two pieces that you see right here were the beginning of this new work that I was doing, these large scale beaded pieces. And so those are about 6 feet high. It's pretty big. It took me about 6 months to do. But I was really learning through this process as I was creating, because there was a lot of pieces that I had prior to this where I was bringing in seed beads, and I was working with the technique that I needed to use. And I was working through everything, and I was thinking, what am I doing? What kind of art am I making? But I knew that I needed to have beads in there somehow, and how do I fix them to this? So I did a lot of research and studying different cultures around the world and how they apply beads. And when I went to South Africa, they were covering full-on chairs with beads, and it was amazing to see the amount of work that they put into that. And my first thought was how'd they get those beads on there? I want to learn how to do that too. But I do a lot of research in how other cultures apply beads to objects, and what does that represent in their culture, and how are they showing the world, who they are as a people. And these are the questions that I often ask myself as I'm working. And so I created these pieces, and now they're, at the Kansas City Museum. You can go see them in the permanent collection, which is really cool. So really close to that was, after I had finished those pieces, I was asked to exhibit in Atlanta, and the name of the exhibit was Storyteller. And it was a lot, the basis of that show was about how we're using these materials to create this work and that connection. And a lot of the work that was in that show was very labor intensive. and the materials were just as important as what they were making. And so when I started this piece right here, I had that in mind, and I kept thinking about like journeys. And in my family, we traveled a lot over the entire United States. My father like took me from Oregon State all the way to Washington, Minnesota, where my mom's family was. So like growing up, we did a lot of traveling. We traveled through the Badlands, just all over the United States we did. And so I kept thinking about those journeys, and I kept thinking about how, because my approach to this piece, which is called Conjured Topography, was a lot different than the two first prior ones. And I think that every piece that I do since then has changed too. My approach to each piece changes, and the things that I'm thinking about. And so as I was creating this, I began to become more free with my expression, and I was starting to realize that it was more abstract, and it alluded to nothing but everything all at the same time, because that's usually like how I approach life. And so I just felt like I was conjuring up these images that I was relating to in experiences as well. And so I feel like it's a journey. And now I've seen that like I was connecting to this piece of wood, and I understand now that like this wood at one time, it was a tree, it was a living entity, and it was growing, and those rings are evidence of growth. And so I see in the beadwork that each line is also evidence of growth. It's an evidence of the journey that I was taking while I was creating this, because a lot of what I connected to as well as a beadworker when I was doing traditional arts is these quiet moments that we have when we're creating, or as a woman, you have these quiet moments that nobody sees, but there's evidence of that too. That there's evidence of when you went and, cleaned, and maybe nobody notices, but it's still there, you know what I mean? And so there's all this evidence that we leave behind of these quiet moments, and so these are like a timestamp of the time that I had spent creating this, and so every single line is evidence of that journey, and trusting myself as a person and as an artist, and really trusting the voice that I have and the things that I'm conjuring up, because it literally is coming from nowhere. And the work that I started creating with these beads, I never knew where it was going to end up. I can kind of conjure up an image really before I begin, and there's a lot of preparation that goes into this process where I'm working with the wood, I'm sanding it, and that in a way is, I call it the handshake moment, where I'm trying to understand what's happening within that piece of wood, and seeing the beauty and the nuances and all the pieces that are the small little details that you can see. And then when I begin this conversation, I let it flow in a way where I'm making these decisions at a moment, and so it's expressive as well, but it's expressive at a really slow rate. It's not like fast or anything, because there's so much planning that goes into this, so I have to think of a color palette, and then preparing the beeswax that goes into this, and then shaping every shape with that beeswax, and making it pliable so that I can work with it. So the beads added at the end are like the final process, and where I can be most expressive, but I also don't know where it's going to end up, and I also have to look back at the work that I had already done and try to continue that in a way that's flowing and meshing. And so there's a lot of standing away from it, getting close, because I can get so caught up in like doing the really small detailed work that I need to take a step back and then see where it's going in general. And so I felt like this is where I fell into a way of understanding myself and how I work as an artist, by just creating freely without expectation of myself as well. So this is a piece that was in DC, and I was really thinking a lot too about summing up my experience, and being able to exhibit here, and then being chosen to go to DC. And I thought a lot about that before this talk, that it was such a good experience to be supported by so many women. It's just like, you know, when I was there and there was just women everywhere and they're all in the arts, and it was just like such a great experience. And it was just like, you know, we can do so much when we come together and support each other. And so that just really is probably the most important part that I'm taking away from this experience, and being able to showcase my work out there and, you know, have other Natives come and see that work, but have everybody be able to connect to it too as well. So, you know, these teachings and these things that I've learned throughout my life, I'm also sharing that with everybody. And so that really is important to me too, as well as an artist. So on to other work. I started creating these tiny little pieces, or 12 by 12. I also felt that I gained confidence in my voice as an artist, and I started to understand that the wood was also like an anchor, or like it was a jumping off point for me to express myself. And so when I started creating these pieces right here, which is called Notes on Conjured Topography, so they're like little tiny pieces that I did, I really wanted to explore, because the experience of conjured topography, it's, you know, it's like 10 feet long. So when it's all beautifully lit up in the gallery and you're moving along it, you're having this experience where there's an interaction happening between you and the piece, and the way that the lights are hitting the beads, because what makes it so amazing and what I love about beads is that there's so many different finishes, there's different types. I mean, I could go on, like the facets and the, you know, that are cut into the beads itself catch the light in the way that there's transparent and opaque. And for me, just kind of nerding out on all of that stuff also, it's just, doing this work allows me to do that. It allows me to just kind of really fuss over all the great beads and, you know, be able to work with them and also highlight what's happening with that material, because there's such great, you know, physical things that are happening as you're interacting with it. And so that piece, I noticed that there's this interaction that's happening. And so when I started creating these pieces, I wanted to focus more on form and shape, and also how the light was playing with those beads and what the shape was doing as I was creating it too. And so this is beeswax on B.F.A. Reeves paper, and that's from my like printmaking years, which I haven't done printmaking in forever, but I really wanted to explore the different shapes, but also work in like a monochrome, you know, colors, and just focus on maybe highlighting or, you know, the lowlights. And so these pieces I really enjoy. I haven't had a chance to really dive too much deeper into it because I've been doing commissions, but I am excited to get back to this work when I get a chance. And this is another part of my practice where I am exploring themes of Indigenous futurisms. This piece had come out of COVID, so I was doing my virtual residency. When I had got accepted to IAIA for my residency, in between the time of the acceptance and then my actual date to go there, COVID had happened and we had the shutdown. And so the mask that you see up at the right-hand corner up here, that was created in my living room while everybody was home and we were all shut down. And, you know, it explores themes about, I've titled these pieces Past, Presence, and Future, because I'm using these items that we use traditionally that are all often associated with traditional, you know, regalia and ceremonial items. That's from the past, but the mask is here from the present. But I'm also thinking about this future where, you know, how would somebody adorn themselves in this future with the items that they have available? Because that also goes back into this idea of generational knowledge, because there was an experience I had where I had created a QR code. I beaded a QR code, and it goes to my Twitter, but like that was a long time ago, and I don't even use Twitter. So, but I was thinking about how culture is influenced by modernity. You know, I was thinking about how culture changes and evolves based off of what's right next to us. And seed beads are evident of that, because traditionally in most native cultures we used whatever we had around us. So there's like birch bark binding, there's quill work, hide work, there's parfleches that were painted with pigments. But seed beads are fairly new to our culture, and so we've taken that and we've repurposed it to become something that represents us now. And I feel like that's such great evidence of like resiliency, and that's what I love about beads too. But I also started thinking about how in this future, so I was at this junkyard and I was salvaging SSD cards from old computers. And I thought, this is what I have available to me, whereas my ancestors would use the whole buffalo. They'd be on the plains and they'd take every part of the buffalo, and that's what they were using to, create and make. But now I have like a junkyard, and so this is what I'm gonna use. And that started getting me into this process of thinking about how we're taking these materials that are surrounding us and what we're doing with them in this future, and like what happens in this, long down the road future, and how is somebody adorning themselves. And so that's where these gas masks have come from. And you see on the bottom right-hand corner that that's a hide scraper. So hide scrapers are usually shaped like that, but I used an SSD card embedded into the wood, and I had beaded it. And all of the red that you see in these is dirt that I had collected from a trip we went down to Oklahoma. It's really amazing, it's red. And so I was just bringing all these different elements that we use today, but also thinking about this future. And so that's another part of my practice is exploring these themes of Indigenous futurisms. And I'm excited to get back to that work too. And so these right here are canotypes that I had created in my residency in November last year. I had went with the intention to create other gas masks, and ended up falling into this process of creating these canotypes. And the beads that you see in there are actually photos from my own beadwork. And then I started using these designs that we have in a lot of our plains tribes. And so this is from the Arapaho tribe. It's a design, but then I've injected my beadwork into that. And so this is titled High Plains Stratified. I think a lot about stratification and layers, and I had done some most recent work where I titled it Stratification, because I think about materials and layers and experience, and how we have memories, and how these things, certain materials will recall, just like a smell will recall a memory for you, and it's also evidence of memories too. And so I did a bunch of these, and it's really, I love the canotype process. It's really been fun. I felt like there's a lot more instant gratification other than beading, because beading takes so long, and so these are just like a way for me to see something instantly, which I love. So there's a lot of satisfaction in that, and so I've done a ton so far. Once I figure out how to get large-scale transparencies again, I'll do more. But I just love exploring the different designs that we have, and really bringing that to life, and injecting like these different types of like textures too, but it's not a texture because it's still flat, and there's a painterly quality to it as well, which I enjoy too, because every single one of these pieces I painted all that canotype liquid onto the paper, and that was also a really fun process for me. But I just wanted to share my other work too. I do murals, which has really been great for me to learn how to think big, because I get so caught up in thinking small in the seed beads. This has been a really way for me to express myself in a larger scale and create. And it's really affected the other work that I've done too, like the beaded pieces. It's also helped me be able to think about large swaths of color. So like the piece that I did at the Kansas City airport, I had to, I don't have a picture of it because we didn't get really good pictures, but I had to think large scale, like 17 feet, and like, how am I gonna fill this space? And I'm also using seed beads, oh my God. And so, I think, you gotta think properly about this, but doing the mural work helped me think and expand my thinking in that sense, where I used larger swaths of colors as opposed to like getting really small like you had seen in conjured topography, this work that I did last year, so this is all from last year, really pushed my skills as a painter. It pushed me in learning how to like measure things, fit everything to scale. So it's also helped me in all the other work that I've done, because that piece at the airport, in my approach to that, I was thinking about how, when you're at an airport, you either have a lot of time to kill or no time to kill. And so you're either going fast or you're going really slow. And so I thought, if anybody has the time, they're going to rush by it. They're going to have to see it from afar, right? And they may not have the time to look closer. But if they do choose to take a closer look, they'll see that it's made out of seed beads. And so I wanted something that caught the eye from far away, but also if somebody chose to look closer, they would be, surprised by what they see. And most everybody is, because they usually think it's just paint. And so the mural work had really helped me shift my thinking in that way. And so this is more recent work. These pieces are called, oh my gosh, I forgot what I called them. Anyways, I'm working with different materials in this. I wanted to start adding other materials and thinking about the layers. Sediment, sentiment. That's the name of the piece. I had to talk my way over to it. But I have memories of my grandmother making me dresses when I was a little girl and using calico. And so calico has a really special place in my heart. I love just all the little tiny flowers in there. And I painted the fabric, but I also use velvet, I use shells. And so these pieces are really about me like exploring, bringing in new materials other than just beads. And then also still having that conversation with what's happening in the wood too. And so, like I was saying, there's this push and pull where I need the wood to anchor me as an artist, but also I want to get away from it and I want to explore beyond that. And so this is kind of like me making that shift as an artist. I also use resins in this, like copal and pine rosin. I love the way what happens to them when you heat them up and the quality that you get. The Oklahoma red dirt's also in this, and so they're really fun to work with. I have 6 other pieces that I created at the beginning of the summer that accompany these 2, and so one day they'll all be together again. And so this brings me to my last piece that I just finished. It just left my studio. This is the one that's going to be at the Autry Museum. And as you can see, I cut half of that wood away. And that's also still my attempt at maybe moving beyond and trusting myself as an artist to create without those anchors too, and feeling that freedom to just express myself. And so this one is really heavily influenced by, our skyscapes, I like to call them here, that we have these beautiful, amazing thunderstorms that are rolling in and these clouds and the different colors that come. And so this is really heavily influenced by, the experiences that I've had witnessing these beautiful skies that we have here in Kansas. And that too was about the piece at the airport as well. It was connecting to the land around me and really finding the beauty in the rolling hills and the skies that we have, and expressing that in a way that doesn't really allude or connect to it exactly, but it's influenced by it. And so these pieces right here, this piece right here is, it's about maybe 7 feet. It's not very long. But this is also the same piece of wood that I salvaged. And so I love the thought of like giving new life and repurposing things too. And so a lot of the work, I'm repurposing new items and giving a new life to something. Because I feel like as a mom, that's what I've done for myself, revisiting a contemporary practice. I've also, given myself permission to be expressive and give myself a new life, because I love being a mom, but I'm also a woman and all these other things, and so I need to live within that too. But also bring all these things that I hold dear to myself, which are, fabric and seed beads and all these teachings that I carry with me, that eventually I'll impart into my children, and hopefully that'll go down the generations. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We have time for a few questions, and I will run this mic around. If you raise your hand when you have a question, if you could please speak into the mic because we are recording, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me hand you the microphone. One moment, please. Thanks.
I'm loud.
Great. We're recording.
Mona,
Yes.
how did your visit to the UK influence you?
Oh my goodness, which I had the pleasure of having high tea with Jan and Ashok in Oxford. So it was lovely. Yes, it did. No, it was interesting to the countryside. We had, me and my husband took a trip to England, and we had the lovely experience of having a taste of all different parts of England. So we got to be in the city, we got to be in a little tiny village where we stayed in this cute little thatched roof, cottage. We were in Oxford, we got to go see, Bath. And so then we kind of went more north where all the more industrial parts of it is. So all of those experiences, like the rolling hills and the sheep, and seemed really similar actually here to Kansas in a way with the rolling hills. I was like, oh, there's not, the absence of mountains is interesting. So, but the culture is also amazing too. So it was fun.
Thank you for your talk. This
Oh.
was really a lovely evening.
Thank you.
And I remember your work from 2 years ago here and being so impressed by it. And this is just a tiny little question.
Yeah.
When you start one of your beaded pieces, where do you put the first bead?
Oh. Because when I'm beginning those pieces, I usually start with the beeswax, and I start to block out shapes. And I spend a lot of time in that stage where you also have to get the beeswax at just the right temperature, because if you heat it up too much, it's going to melt everywhere, but you can't work with it when it's cold. And also the wax that I use is like a resin and petroleum jelly mixture. And so, so I put copal resin and pine resin in there to help with the stickiness, but the petroleum jelly is to help it make more malleable. But I still have to heat it up. So I have like this little Walmart heater that I use, and I shoot it right at this whole pile of beeswax that I have, and I start shaping all the beeswax, and I get it to a point where I can work with it, where it's not melting, and then I start shaping everything out. And then I spend a lot of time just looking at the shapes that I've created and maybe taking things away. But like I said, I don't know where it's always going to end up, so I might add to it as I'm working. But usually I work with strings of beads, and so I usually put a whole string down first. And I know that when I'm beginning the work, I'm really apprehensive. So if I go back here, and I don't know if you can see it really, but if you see towards the bottom, all the way till you get to that first red maroon looking shape, I was very apprehensive about what I was making. I was holding myself back. I was just making lines, and I knew that I needed to go beyond that. And so right when I got to that red line, I was like, you know what, whatever, just start making. And that's when everything just got really crazy, and I didn't know what was gonna happen next, and it was just always a surprise. And I started to become more free. And the thing is about working with this medium, with seed beads and beeswax, you really can't take it back. If you have to be sure. And I do always use this piece especially as that it's a trust fall with myself as an artist, and knowing that the decisions that I'm making, I have to be okay with letting them be. Because to take it away, I can't just paint over it. And that's what I love about doing murals, is because I'm oh, I made a mistake, I'm just gonna paint over it, whatever. I don't like this, whatever, paint over it, you know what I mean? And so with this, it's I have to be sure, and I have to be okay, and I have to let things go too, and then I might have to make different choices based off of what I've already put down. And then I have to create from that point, and to be able to make it what it is, because even what's happened in this process, it is what it is. It's just c'est la vie. You have to let it be, and it just be okay with it all. And it's really helped me in the decision-making process and all the other parts of my practice, because I jump between all these different mediums, and being okay with what I've done is just what it needs to be. and to move on too, instead of fretting over the choices that I've made, you know. So yeah, that's one string is where I start. Sorry, to answer your question.
Hi.
Hi.
I know that with every generation, there are certain legacies from the past that it's kind of like, oh, I didn't know you'd hook on that one, but great.
Right.
Is there anything with the newer generation that you found that they've really held from your culture or from other traditions that you've tried to pass on that it's like, I didn't know you were going to go that way, but rock on?
Yeah. I mean, you know, because like there's music, and I feel that, you know, so like if you're thinking about in a cultural sense, you know, a lot of, there's such huge influences in the beading world where there's like sports logos, or like you've seen my Jedi one, you know what I mean? Or it's not Jedi, it was the Rebel Alliance, I believe. And so there's all these influences, and sometimes it can, you know, like I really love the beadwork where they're using graffiti, like style writing in their beadwork, which I absolutely love. And, you know, and then there's things that are cringe, but then I'm like, well, am I old? You know what I mean? Like, is this because I'm like, you know, that's not traditional, like, you know what I mean? And so then I try to think about like, where are they coming from, and like, how is that going to affect the next generation? Because that is going to be an influence, you know, and the type of work that everybody's doing, but it changes so quickly. Like even in the span of a couple of years, there's so many things that people are just bringing in and using in their regalia, or, you know, how they're expressing themselves, that you really can't even keep up. And it took me 45 hours to do that QR code, and I think even by the time it was done, I was like, you know, everything had already changed, you know? Like there's already so much change already, and I was like, this took me 45 hours, but, you know, that's really kind of the things that I pay attention to as well, you know, as an artist, and the influence that's happening within the younger generation. So I'm on TikTok a lot, which what I love about that, and I was telling my father were having this conversation the other night, because he was talking about those old cowboy movies and how, you know, the native representation in the cowboy movies was like, well, that was really cringe, and we can see that now. And, you know, I was telling him, I remember when like Dances with Wolves came out, or Smoke Signals, and we were so excited to see like native representation on the screen. And now we have all of these amazing examples, and like my children, you know, get to grow up in a world where they see other natives, not like people who are representing a native, be themselves and share their culture real time. And that's what they get to grow up with, which is amazing. So, you know, I think that treading the waters of traditionalism, and, you know, there's all these other parts that come along with that, like, you know, how do we keep traditions alive, but how do we also keep them safe, you know what I mean? And so how are we going to move forward? And because it's such a new world, that there's no handbook for that. And how do we navigate those waters going forward? And you know, I think that when it comes to spirituality and these practices, they are very closed for a good reason. But then there's other parts that are able to be shared, like the ribbon skirt, which is what I use a lot in my work. You know, it's such a huge and amazing like example of expressionism. Like most Native women wear ribbon skirts, you know, and so like you see in this mural right here, there's, you know, like these what looks like examples of ribbons, because it's such a way for all of these people to express themselves, but within, you know, the confines of like, you know, this dress, but they're able, it's just endless expressionism. So I don't know if I answered your question, but okay.